The idea for the time being of these negotiations, and these are negotiations, these are not talks. Now, words matter. We're not chatting with the US. We are negotiating. Okay? That is very important. So the goal for the time being in these negotiations is to find an agreement in principle. So if you want an agreement on what is the scope of play that we would then translate into a further agreement. So, of course, then, when we move to the discussion on an agreement, well, we would fully respect the interinstitutional obligations that we have as part of the treaty. And that will allow potentially, of course, the Parliament to come in. Now, can I guarantee that the agreement will be final? What I can tell you is that as part of the request that we have made to the US, of course, we have been arguing quite strongly about the importance of standstill. Because fundamentally, the question, Chairman, on the duties is very relevant, but beyond the duties, the fundamental issue, the main issue that we have is one of absence of certainty. And that is what, why, again, from time to time, I come back with my professor hat, but why is the international rules-based system so important? It is because it sets the rules of the game. It gives legal certainty to our companies. So, of course, what is very important for us is to achieve a situation which would provide the greatest amount of legal certainty. Now, Mr. Chairman, again, you suspect that President Trump thinks about EU legislation. We are not in the business of second-guessing President Trump or anyone. What we have told very clearly the US counterparts, and I believe that Commissioner Šefčovič repeated this in the plenary last week or 2 weeks ago, the EU legislation that results from the EU choices is not up for negotiation. So this is very clear. We have made it very clear. So if the United States would like to have a conversation about one or the other pieces of legislation of the EU, well, this is not up for negotiation. Now, this does not mean that we cannot discuss non-tariff barriers. In all our trade agreements, we discuss non-tariff barriers. We never give up on our legislation. But there are many ways to discuss on non-tariff barriers. There are ways to facilitate, there are ways to recognize certain elements, there are ways to go for certain elements of mutual recognition and so on. And this is one of the things that we are doing. Now, all this discussion about are you ready to use the anti-coercion instrument, are you ready to use one or the other instrument? The anti-coercion instrument is not an end in itself. I mean, I understand the political value that some of you attach. The anti-coercion instrument is an instrument, is a legal basis that the Council and Parliament have decided to give the European Union. So the question is not when are you going to use the anti-coercion instrument. The question is it opportune for the defence of the EU interest to adopt measures that in the EU legal system can only be adopted under the anti-coercion instrument? And the answer to that question is we are looking at everything. Everything is going to be on the table, and we will decide when the time comes whether we need to use also the anti-coercion instrument. Can I confirm that we're not accepting the 10% baseline? Yes, I can. We have told the Americans that the negotiation cannot be about them keeping their baseline and us doing all the movement. This is an agreement. This is a two-way street. This is a negotiation. So it has to be a two-way street. So we have clearly not accepted the baseline, as we will not accept the announced potential new baseline of 30%. Now, I hear that the Commission is not able to get the negotiations done with the US. I wonder how many other countries have been able to get the negotiations with the US through the line. Nobody. There has been an agreement in principle with the UK that is still all up to see what has happened, and there has been a de-escalation with China. That's it. That's it. That's it. So the reality is that, I think, again, Commissioner Šefčovič must have told you in the plenary that this is a negotiation like no other. It is a very peculiar negotiation indeed. But this is, this is what we do, and we remain convinced that the best approach is to find a negotiated outcome for the EU interest. I will not speculate on what is the US strategy. But, I want to say something still. I mean, this is a negotiation, so you have to be able to anticipate that from time to time there is one of the negotiating partners that decide to do a certain move or the other. I think what is very important is to remain calm in these situations and not all of a sudden say, somebody has decided to make a move, so I throw my whole strategy and my whole tactics in the air. That would not be the right negotiating approach. So we're also not negotiating with a goal to avoid failure. Again, I can understand the political element, it's important. No, what we are doing is that we are seeking a negotiated outcome so that we can defend in the best way the interest of our companies and our citizens. This is the goal. Because again, this relationship is so important that we have to make sure that it remains, subject to the lowest tariffs and subject to the lowest barriers possible. So this is also the reason why we remain convinced that the right thing to do for the time being is to focus on the negotiated outcome. And rather than starting, flexing further our muscles on all kinds of measures, because we don't really see what this would bring. We don't think that this is, that this makes us look weak. It makes us determined to achieve what we want to do, which is a negotiated outcome. Now, I had an indirect question on what we would be negotiating, and I can confirm that indeed we have a certain number of elements that we're negotiating with the US. There is a tariff angle that covers both the so-called universal baseline tariff, but also seeking a solution on the sectoral tariffs. And for the time being, the two sectoral tariffs that worry us the most is, of course, the ones on cars and the ones on steel. But we're also talking about pharmaceuticals because we're very worried about the ongoing Section 232 investigation. And then, of course, there is also a discussion on non-tariff barriers, but I was just saying it's not a question of us removing or changing our legislation. It's a question for us to find things that we can do together with the US to the benefit of our companies so that we simplify the trade with the US. And I hope I have answered all the questions. Otherwise, if you let me know, I'll be happy to come back to one or the other. Thank you.